International partnerships often involve a lot of people, resources, money, different languages and cultures. In such settings, there are heaps of things that can go wrong. Our team of researchers agreed that while you cannot avoid failure, we at least want to learn from it. But how? We asked people in Rwanda, Switzerland, Sri Lanka, Bolivia and beyond the same question. What is the role of failure in international partnerships? And how can it become brilliant? The term brilliant failure was inspired by Dutch researcher Paul Iske. He calls it a well-prepared opportunity with a different outcome than planned and a learning effect. And indeed, failing is part of the essence of research. Embracing brilliant failure doesn't mean anything goes. It is a skill set which can transform an unexpected twist into an opportunity to lead and to learn.
Well, there are a lot of cultural differences, and to cope with them or to cope with failures is a challenge we are still learning. For example, emotionally, I sometimes get so excited that I even do things that are not correct, and I know they are not correct. You know, for example, one example is, how do you say that in English? Gesichtswahren. Help me, keep face. How do you say that?
Safe face.
Safe face, yeah. Thank you very much, Elliot. So saving face is very much important in the African context, at least in Ghana. And then in a workshop, even a principal researcher found so many wrong excuses, excuses that were not relevant for why he didn't say that. And so I contradicted him openly, bluntly, saying, hey, that's not true. And in the very same minute, I recognized this is not good to do so, to say it openly, though that's not a good coping with cultural differences. But on the other hand, I'm still learning how to do that in a nicer way. But it's very important to also say, well, in a research project with partners between North and South, you cannot just sit there and say, I get the money, but I don't do anything for it. That's also not what we expect, but we need to find and to learn ways how to deal with that.
En las comunidades donde trabajo, especialmente en Aymaras, no ven el fracaso, como algo, no se sienten mal. Ellos siempre toman la iniciativa de decir, si ahora no hemos cumplido con el trabajo comunal como estaba planificado, por ejemplo, el aseo de la sede social, entonces ellos deciden continuar mañana, al día siguiente. O si nos toman la iniciativa de que puedan distribuirse a tareas por sector, por población. Entonces, ellos yo he visto que no se sienten mal, que dicen, no hemos cumplido, no. Siempre toman la alternativa de buscar otra solución y eso lo hacen conjuntamente. Eso se refleja en las organizaciones campesinas aquí en el altiplano.
I mean, that's certainly a cultural embedded form of accepting responsibilities. Yeah. And I think that's missing somehow, at least from my perspective, is sort of the quality of responsibility as an open topic. Who can take responsibility? Of course, in a hierarchical setting, is always the boss. So I'd rather not do anything because I can then blame the boss. So responsibility, I think, is a very pertinent issue around also topic of failure.
My cultural background, from my context, women are more likely to accept failure than men. Actually, we even have a proverb in Rwanda: "To fail as a man is just his way of doing things." So for men, it's somehow not very easy. But for women, it's just obvious when you realize you have made a mistake, immediately you apologize and move on.
Murakoze cyane. Icya mbere ni uko umufatanyabikorwa iyo aje atubwira ikimuzanye, icyo wumva twafatanya nawe. Iyo dusanze rero biri mu byo natwe twari dukeneye, duhita dukorana nyine tugafatanya, kuko abameze nka bya bindi bavuga ngo nuko rwose rwabyukaga, duhita dufatanya.
The people we work with in other countries they're people we found over the years. We work well with them, right? So they understand what the logic of having a partnership is and of collaboration. But there clearly a lot of Sri Lankan researchers, I think, have two issues. One is that they might collaborate, but they have a very limited view of what that means. So they just sit there and collect data for somebody else. And I've been very unwilling to do that. I mean, if we work with the Swiss, we're equal partners. So I think many of them are used to that sort of subordinate role, and they sort of go along with it. And I think that's one issue. And then there's a reaction, I think, to that issue, maybe put it that way. Some of them they don't understand how you cooperate with foreign researchers and on equal terms. So they have all these things like, we won't give you our data, yes, or we won't tell you what's going on, and this kind of thing. Or I think maybe Sri Lankan researchers, even at the top end, have when I say top end, at the top institutions like yours, have very little experience and maybe self-confidence about working on an equal basis with international partners.
Yo he visto de que tienen que ser líderes y tienen que partir de ellos mismos, ¿no? Si hay interés. Lo que priorizamos es que también estas organizaciones tengan algo que quieran formularlo, plantearlo.
I think guarantee for failure is lack of commitment, lack of ownership. For example, one hidden expectation is we assume that all the people involved are in the same way intrinsically motivated as we are. And then we are surprised it's not the case. And then we have to deal with that, which is often very challenging.
I think, of course, if it's a really bad failure, emotions probably come into it. But I think how you deal with it depends on what your role is in that partnership. I mean, if you're responsible, then there's probably more you can do, and there's more responsibility. If you're not necessarily one of the lead people in that, then you just have to sit back and wait. Some of those too. So I think the one that we had this big failure, we effectively, it was terminated. And we then just had to rebuild something else. So I think
the learning really happens when failure is being put into a context, the context of growth. And so when we can put failure into the context of growth, that has really to do with mindset. So for me, a successful partnership begins with the intention. And also a failure of the partnership begins with the intention. If we could get deep enough in our own mind and understand what actually is the motivating factors, why we're doing something. Often it is a superficial idea, or it might be a very self-fulfilling idea, or a self-centered intention. If we're clear with that, but often we're not, because we're either motivated by some emotions, or we're motivated by something that is not quite clearly. And this is where contemplative practices can really help you to look deeper into, for instance, what is it that your values are, or what is your heart, as opposed to your mind or your brain wanting.